It'll be nice if we have foreign guests to just drop a note into the chat box to say where you are from or where you are now. Right. Also, a warm welcome to friends of the museum, docents from the Peranakan Museum. TPAS is honored on the collaboration. Thank you for spending the afternoon with TPAS via this Zoom presentation, The Peranakan Identity, Staying Relevant in a Fast-Changing World. Before we start, some housekeeping. All participants will be muted. Kindly post any questions in the chat box. At the end of the presentation, we will do our best to answer all questions. Before we go into the presentation, let me introduce myself. I'm Yuen from the Peranakan Association, Singapore. TPAS, as we are referred to, is totally a volunteer association, the beacon of the Peranakan culture, serving with passion and commitment. For those who have not joined us as members, kindly consider to do so. It's a one-time membership fee. Click on the link to join. Also, do subscribe to our YouTube channel to enable the uploading of informative videos. Please help us to achieve a viewership of 1,000. We are not quite there yet, so please help us. Now for the presentation. We can't escape change. Change is ever present. We have to evolve with change. Culture and heritage goes through the same evolution. We lament of days of past, but we can adapt to ensure culture and heritage stays current and relevant to be passed down through the generations. TPAS is grateful to have with us this afternoon Baba Thien, who is a youthful 34 years young, 5th generation Malacca Peranakan. Having been brought up in the Peranakan household, he is passionate about being Baba. So much so that after his postgraduate studies, he continues to research the Peranakan culture and manages the Baba and Nyonya Heritage Museum in Malacca. So do visit when COVID is over. We are looking forward to travel. Today, he will share with us about being adaptable and to simplify the intricacies of our culture, to stay relevant and to embrace change, yet living the rich Peranakan heritage. Over to you, Thien.
Okay, thank you, Gwen, for the introduction. Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Okay, now I will start the slide now. Okay, thank you for the introduction. So I will start the presentation today. It's more of a sharing, I would say, about my thoughts, on what is it meant to be Baba and Nyonya. Like we always, I'm working in the museum, so often I've heard that people say, "Hey, oh, we must visit the Baba and Nyonya Museum." Looking at things, Peranakan, looking at everything beautiful and stuff like that. But then again, there is this misconception among the larger community where when we talk about Baba and Nyonya, people always thought that so they would often picture us living in houses like museums, surround ourselves with all the beautiful, intricate artifacts. But then, how many of us today is still living like that, or living in a museum? Yeah. So, having this thought, I came up with my study, which I did a few years back. Yeah. To to study on our identity today, like what we are, how have we become. Like taking, for example, that two little girl there that I put in my slides here, yeah? The first slide. Now, they are my aunties. This photograph is taken in the year late 1920s. Do they dress in kebaya and sarung that we often picture? Baba and Nyonya must be wearing sarung and kebaya. But how many of us today still be wearing sarung and kebaya? So if we don't wear sarung and kebaya, the Nyonyas, for instance, would they still be considered as Nyonya? Because often people say that I cannot identify Baba and Nyonya. I don't know whether they are Baba and Nyonya. Yeah, of course, because all of us, don't have blue faces or even green. If that is the case, then it's easy for us to identify the Baba and Nyonya. But then again, we all dress in modern attire today. So what makes us unique, or how do we want to identify ourselves? That is something that we should, think about today. Do we want to be identified by our attire, uh, the possession that we have at home, the things that we put on display? So are these the identity markers that we want people to associate us with? Yeah. But how many of us would be having all these uh, artifacts at home? Yeah. Yeah. So this is something that I would like to share with all of you today. And then perhaps, you know, it is good for us to reflect on these identity markers. And then we should also hope that this would inspire more people to keep our identity and then pass it on to the next generation to ensure there is a continuity of our Peranakan identity. Okay. Now, to begin with, I think it is important for me to sort of define identity. Yeah. Now, to begin with, I think identity is very complex. It is not easy for us to just talk about it in within an hour or so. But this is something that I would like to share. Yeah, especially in terms of our Peranakan identity. Yeah, how do we define this identity? Is it a self identity, or is it a collective identity that we would associate with? Now, as for the Peranakan identity, I believe it is something belonging to a group or collective identity. Yeah, as compared to self, which is very intrinsic yourself, more to psychology. But Peranakan identity is of a social identity, yeah, on how we would portray our qualities, beliefs, and also how do we express ourselves, yeah. So that would be reflected through our much celebrated material culture. Then again, we always like to label things. Yeah. This is Peranakan tiles. Okay. Uh, um, uh, but then again, how do we classify what is Peranakan tiles? And some people even said to me, "Oh, you have got this Peranakan look, very typical Peranakan look." Then I was like, "What do you mean by typical Peranakan look? Do I not look the same?" Yeah. How do you define this typical Peranakan look? Yeah. So in today's scenario, it's not as easy in the past, where perhaps days of my grandmothers, it's very easy to identify people of the Baba and Nyonya community. Why? Most likely at that point of time, those who are wearing sarung and kebaya, you know, would be uh, regarded as a Nyonya. But in today's context, how many of us would be wearing sarung and kebaya on a daily basis, unless we were to attend functions, like a Peranakan ball or a dinner and dance, yeah? But besides that, do we still, put on kebaya and sarung on a daily basis? Hardly, I think anyone in the community would still be doing that, yeah, on a daily basis. So this is something that I think it is very important for us to actually take note uh, today, yeah, rather than we give ourselves a set of criteria that we would want to be associated with, yeah, and then like for example, we would say that, oh, to be a baba, one must be able to speak in the fatwa, yeah. If you can't, then you are not a true baba. But we have, yes, partly true, but we have to again ask ourselves, how many of us today, yeah, can still speak the patois? Of course, I am very fortunate because I grew up with both my grandmothers who cannot speak any other languages besides the Baba patois. So I have the privilege to grow up with the language and speak it fluently. But my cousins, for instance, who don't grow up with my grandmother and don't spend much time with my grandmothers, they themselves can't speak a proper Baba sentence. So are they less a Baba than myself? I am sure many of us also face this dilemma, whereby we always have this set of criteria. Oh, you must be like this. You must have, for instance, those who don't practice ancestral worship no longer can be considered as a typical Peranakan. Yeah. But then again, what is this term typical? Yeah. Do we want to exclude our own uh, in-group members, our own Baba and Nyonya, from being Baba and Nyonya themselves? Or should we, be more uh, inclusive to all and everyone from our community, and even those who are interested in our community is also welcome to celebrate this much celebrated identity. Yeah. Okay. Now, when we talk about Baba and Nyonya, do we exactly know who we are? Yeah. Many have asked me about how do I define myself, because they heard that people talk about Baba and Nyonya not being able to communicate in Mandarin, for instance. They say, oh, Baba and Nyonya is a group of people who are Chinese but cannot converse in the, the Chinese language or in any of the Chinese dialect. But if uh, that is true, how about the Baba and Nunyas of today? Like myself, for instance, I was sent to Chinese school. Yeah, I can speak Mandarin. So would I be overqualified to be considered as a Baba myself? Because I can speak Mandarin. People understand that, oh, Baba cannot speak Mandarin. How come you can speak? Yeah, then people would have this mindset or overgeneralization that, oh, those who cannot speak Chinese, or they will call us OCBC, then we are uh, Baba and Nyonya. This happened to me when the Chinese premier visited the museum many years ago, and I brought him on a tour in the museum. So when I introduced myself and then I introduced the museum, he stopped me for a second and asked me, "You are a Baba, right? But then again, you know, uh, how can you speak Mandarin?" Yeah. So I believe that people have briefed him that, oh, Baba Nyonya cannot speak Mandarin and stuff like that. Yeah. But then I believe this is uh, overgeneralization that perhaps it is time for us to actually think back again. Yeah, how do we want to portray ourselves? Yes, we are a group of acculturated minority community in Malacca. Yeah, or we can also be found in district settlement, namely Penang, Malacca, and Singapore. Yeah, but then we have to also respect that there are differences among the Baba Nyonya group. Yeah, this is something that we among ourselves must also be aware of, because a lot of time we like to say that, oh, like for example, for us in Malacca, we would say that the Nyonyas or the Baba and Nyonyas in Penang are not pure because they don't speak the Baba Patois. However, those in Penang would say, oh, uh, the those in Malacca are very, very Malay because they speak Malay. Huh? But we have to understand that in Penang they speak Hokkien, Baba Hokkien, and in Malacca we speak Baba Malay. Yeah. So this is the differences that we have to be aware of, and at the same time, how do we want to move forward? Because when we talk about Baba and Nyonya, the identity of our culture, when we look at books, when we look at museum, how they want to portray us are all of the past. There's no museum on the Baba and Nyonya community that talks about our current generation or discuss much about our current generation. Uh, we often portray our past, our much celebrated, colorful past, which is important for us to know our past, but at the same time, it is also very important for us to take note. Yeah, where do we want to go after this? Yeah, in what direction do we want to head to? Yeah, do we want to still, be living in houses like a museum? Or which I don't think many of us still is in one right now. Yeah, I'm sure most of us are living in modern houses, of course, with some Peranakan touches that reminds us of the past. But then, do we want to be, in other words, being labeled as old-fashioned? Yeah, many of our youth, they tend to avoid doing a lot of Peranakan practices. Why? They say that it's very leceh, it's very troublesome. Yeah, they are so afraid to continue our Peranakan culture. Why? Because they say, oh, banyak kerja, huh? A lot of things to be done. Like for example, when we have the ancestral worship at home, yeah, it requires a team of people to get together. Huh? Like my mom and aunties will be cooking, yeah, and then myself will be preparing to lay out all the cooked food, dishes on the altar, and my cousins will be helping, bringing all the dishes in and out. Yeah? So things like this, when we grow up in this environment, people would say, "Oh, it's a lot of work." If possible, they do not want to continue this. Yeah, or they say that oh, so it's so very very we have to actually put in a lot of effort to do all this, and then at the end of the day, how many families can still practice this? Huh? So this is something that today we have to actually look at. Huh? Like for instance, um, the attire. How many would still be willing to put on kebaya and sarung to go to their office today? Why not we encourage them to just, okay, put on a kebaya to your office to show pride, of your culture. At least we still see people in kebaya, at least the top, and 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 rather than not seeing it at all, because like my cousins who are teachers, they say that there's a certain selected days that they would be required to wear their traditional attire, but kebaya would not be of the choice because they say it's very troublesome. They have to even tie their saros and so on. Why not we modernize certain elements? Like for example, you can wear a kebaya with perhaps pants or those ready-made sarong. Then it would actually bring some hope for people to start continue to wear this. Yeah. Okay. Now, like I've said, our identity. We are always in these identity crises. Yeah, where we are always labeled as OCBC, yeah, and being Chinese and not being able to speak the Chinese dialect, and at the same time also, uh, we have these biological versus the cultural aspect, whereby, when in school, in primary school, I don't have an issue, yeah. So when I introduce myself, and people, it's only much related part that my classmates would know that I'm a Baba. Why? Because my Chinese is not that fluent. And also, when we talk, yeah, I've always had this identity crisis in school because many of the Chinese terms I do not know, like, how we refer to our uncles and aunties. Uh, it's very different in Mandarin, and it's very different in our Baba terms because we follow the Hokkien terminology. Yeah, so then when I discuss this further with my classmates, then I realized, okay, there are differences. But then again, they never doubt or question my identity. Perhaps uh, they are aware of it because they grew up in Malacca. Their families will also have friends from the Baba Nyonya community. But those who have not have any exposure to the Baba Nyonya community, yeah, then we need to spend a little bit more effort. Yeah, when I think I remembered I was in university, for instance. On the first day when I introduced myself, everyone thought that I'm a Malay. Yeah, after when I introduced my name, then they said, "Oh, you're Chinese." I said, "Yes." But perhaps I don't really look Chinese, but then again, some of my cousins, they look very fair. So how do we want to 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 distinguish whether the biological or the cultural aspect? Because we cannot be wearing our attire uh, on a daily basis, unlike in the past. So it's a very different context today. All this misunderstanding, mis all this misunderstanding happen because of our experience. We cannot portray, or today we cannot be identified like those of our forefathers in the past. Take this photograph that I also include in this slide. For instance, when I explain about Baba Inuit culture to my friends, they often regarded us as Malays. Yeah? Unfortunately, they would think that, the first question they would ask me, so do you take pork? This happened in university when I explained to my friends that I'm of a Baba Nyonya descendant. Then they would ask, hey, so do you take pork? Do you celebrate Hari Raya? Questions like these. And then when I showed them this photograph of my grandparents, a wedding photograph of my grandparents, then they said, "Ui, you guys are more traditional than their own grandparents." Huh? So, there is this crisis that happened in myself, yeah, where it's very hard for me to explain our identity to people who are not aware of our culture. Yeah, they don't know our origin. Unfortunately, in Malaysia as well, I think it is taught in schools that who are the Babas and Nyonyas, but it's just in a very short paragraph or sentence, like we would often being portrayed as descendants of Hang Limpo, or someone who the union between Malay and Chinese would create, or the descendants would be known as Baba and Nyonya today. So how much can we get from this? Does it is it helpful? You know, that help people to know us better. Yeah, and then books often portray us in kebayas, in sarung, yeah, and the babas in baju Cina, and the babas don't really have much uh, distinguished. I mean, they don't have really their own attire, unlike the Nunyas in baju panjang and kebaya. So they don't see people walking in kebaya and baju panjang anymore unless they come to the museum. Yeah. So they often ask me, so do you guys still exist today? Yeah. So if we don't exist, then what am I? What am I today? It's very hard for me to explain sometimes to people that, hey, we are not just about what you see. Yeah, it is the Peranakan spirit that that makes us who we are. Okay. Now, talking so much about the markers just now that I've mentioned, yeah, we most of the time we are associated with our material artifacts. Yeah? We can't blame the people because it is in books and also in museums where they would often portray us with our material culture. Like for instance, if you look at all these photographs here that I put up, it's not all the markers that would constitute a Baba Nyonya, but some of it, yeah, like the food culture, for instance. People always say that, oh, do you eat buah keluak? Do you like buah keluak? When we talk about Baba food, yeah. But then again, we don't just take buah keluak every day. There are so much more to our culture than just buah keluak. Yeah? But then people often associate this with the Baba Nyonya culture. But then if we take this as a marker of our identity, then it would be unfair to those from Penang, yeah, who don't really eat pork a lot. Likewise, for the chana, the one that I placed in the middle, yeah, it is a very unique offering that would only be seen in Malacca and also used in Singapore as well. But can we take this as a marker of our identity? Yeah. Likewise, like the sarung and kebaya just now. It used to be the it can be an icon of our culture, but can it still be a marker of our identity today? How many families would still be offering this chana on their altars? And like I've said just now, how many of us still be wearing sarung and kebaya on a daily basis? We would be wearing sarung and kebaya on special occasions, yeah. But then that don't only limit it to only the Baba Nina community. It is so well received that many of us would be choose to wear sarung and kebaya on special occasions, and it has become part of the Malacca or Malaysian identity at large. Yeah. So can this still be considered as our markers? Yeah. Like for example, the beautiful porcelains, we call it the Pinang Mangkok Shanghai, yeah, or also known as the Nyonya ware. Yeah. Can it still be regarded as our marker of our identity today? Yeah. How many Peranakans would own huge collection of such artifacts at home? Yeah. Yes, of course. Uh, if you look back in the past, it's quite common. Most families would be having at least a few pieces in their cupboards. But as for today, yeah, how many who still have this? And then, there are some people who say that, oh, these are reproductions, it's not the real thing. Yeah. So do we need the real thing, the real antiques to constitute our identity? Yeah. Same goes for the jewelry. A lot of people say, oh, these are Peranakan jewelries. What do you mean by Peranakan jewelries? Huh? Do you mean their designs? If you look at it, if we study, they all have got different influences from the West as well. Yeah, all the croissant, the brooches, has got influence from Victorian period, uh, and then we even have some from has got Indian looking pieces. Why? Because the craftsmen are all from India in the past. They are very good at setting intans and diamonds. Same goes for the embroidery. A lot of people say that, oh, to be a typical Baba, you must use a typical uh, tokwi for your altar. Yeah, what do you mean by typical? A lot of people always ask me that, oh, you mean in the past they actually do this tokwi in lacquer? Huh? But they forgot that we actually import all this from China. Huh? We It is commonly seen in Peranakan homes, but we cannot say that all these are uh, exclusively or typically Peranakan. There are, like for example, other instances like the Chanak, for instance. We always say that, oh, this is a Peranakan Chanak, but if we study, it is actually a Teochew Chanak that is widely found until today in Teochew in China, and also in settlements that has got Teochew community. Yeah, it is part of their offering. So can we take these, and say that, oh, these belong to us, and you must have all these to make our identity. So then again, yes, it is an important part of our culture, but what would be like, for example, people would say, okay, how you want to call yourself a Baba? Huh? Oh, you must know this, you must know that, you must have this, you must have that. Huh? So if I am lack of one thing, can I still be considered as a Baba? For example, the language. Those days they said that Baba cannot speak Chinese, cannot speak the Chinese dialect, or cannot speak Mandarin. But now I can. So am I overqualified to be a Baba because I can speak Mandarin? Yeah, yeah. So these are the markers that we should be, uh, take note on. How do we want to be seen? Yeah. How do we, what do we want to bring forward after this? Because why? My grandmother always tell me that, oh, now it's very different. Huh? It's no longer like those days. Yes, I agree. It is very different today because why? We, became very modern. Yeah, we live in the modern society, so we have, adjusted to it. Of course, we still would like to preserve our past, something, a very good reminder of our past, yeah, which is good, yeah. But we must also not scare off our younger generation, or the current generation, yeah. Like, you know uh, those days, people say that, oh, to cook, yeah, you must, the sambal, if you don't giling, you don't pound it, it won't taste as good, it's not authentic. Then you would actually, scare people. You would actually make them not cook at all, because they say, oh, yo, to cook a proper Nyonya dish is so troublesome. you have to pound, you have to healing your rempah, or else then it is you better don't cook. Then we would actually discourage people to continue our tradition. Yeah, okay, like this. Okay, now I am sure that most of us would say that okay, we must tumbuk our chili and our rempah the old-fashioned way. Then only it would taste good. Frankly, my mother at home, yeah, I think 90% of the time she would blend her rempah in the food processor. Okay, I remember. I think the last time I saw her using the batu giling when I was 10 years old. I think, yeah, I like it. That's like 24 years ago. Yeah, I would play with those days got no toys, no smartphone, no PS, so we would keep ourselves busy, when our mothers are in the kitchen as well. So I would just go there and, trying to help her with the batu giling. Yeah. So, to do all that spices, that preparation part, if you say that a Nyonya cuisine, must be made of all these, then you would actually discourage, like myself, if my mom say that, to cook a proper Nyonya dish, you must tumbuk your rempah, you must healing. I think I would just give up rather than, spending my time to tumbuk and giving all the rempahs. Yeah, I would just say, oh, forget about it. Yeah. So do we want to, send this out, this instill this fear in our younger generation? Yeah, before they even start to know. They would just say, oh, yo, might as well don't do. Huh? Just went by. So, always today, in today's scenario, we must think. Of course, they would say that, my grandmother would say that, oh, if you tumbuk the rempah, it would taste different. Huh? But sambal belacan would still be a sambal belacan if you blend it, right? Rather than, you not do it, then you don't know how a sambal belacan tastes like. Even to make pongteh, we have to, those days, they tumbuk, pound the shallots. So if you don't pound the shallots, you say that, oh, if you don't pound, then you won't make a good pongteh. Most likely people tend to not pound today, right? They would just, oh, you forget it. So instead, why not just say, hey, it's the same, you just blend and then you still get a pot of pongteh, although, the shallots are blended, it is still a pongteh. You can still serve it to your family. Yeah, which is, part of our culture rather than we actually, before even letting them to start to know the culture, we already scared them. Yeah. When they enjoy this, uh, then they would say, hey, they would, learn how to prepare it. And then that is when the education part comes in. Like, perhaps we say, oh, in the past, grandma used to pound this with the lesong. Yeah. And then they would know, oh, okay, so this is what it was used for, or how it, how we function this lesong and stuff like that. It's not just this lesong is just one aspect of our culture that we can educate and how we should, adapt to the modern changes, rather than, or the lesson would just end up as another flower pot at home. Or I've often seen the batu healing, the batu bowl becoming part of the uh, fountain in landscaping. Yeah, so things like this is good, a reminder of us uh, of things of the past, but at the same time also to make sure there is a continuation. We must adjust to all these modern facilities around us. Yeah, for example, is this food processor and the lesson part. Okay, I'm sure there are many more examples. Like for instance, in the past, my grandmother, I used to see her, washing uh, uh, um, sarong, yeah, and then she would put this. what is it? Tapioca starch to it, tajin, to make to straighten the to make it smooth, so that she won't have to iron. So do you still do it now? Yeah. But if you don't do it now, would you want to discourage them from wearing sarong? They will say that, oh, we, if we don't do it the old way, you might as well not wear it. Like, then we would, instead of encouraging, we would be discouraging them in continuing our lifestyle and our tradition. Okay, and this is just one of it. There are many more that we can go on. Okay, now next, I mentioned about the markers of our identity. So in the 21st century today, how or what do we want to be associated with? Do we want to still say that, oh, to be a nyonya, you must tumbuk your sambal belacan? To be a nyonya, you must wear sarong, or you must wear sarong and tumbuk your sambal belacan. Things like that. Yeah, because while working in the museum and also when I'm attached to the association, many came to us and asked, how would you identify your own member? How you would, what are the criteria that you would say that would constitute a person to be Baba and Nyonya? Is it the language part, cultural practices, or the food culture? Hmm? Maybe I think a lot of us would say many things, yeah. And of course, if we look at books, history books, and even museums, they would have this whole set of criteria to classify what or how can you be a Baba or a Nyonya. But then again, we must always remember that we no longer live in days of our forefathers or our grandparents. We are living in a modern scenario. Like, for instance, even uh, the the vehicle have changed. Yeah, in the past, if you look at all the books, the nyonyas would be the babas would be riding in uh, carriages, but now we are driving cars or take MRT. Does that make us less baba than they are? Hmm? So things like this. If we think back again, yeah, we should not limit ourselves to only what is known in the past, huh? Because or else you have this misunderstanding, and we can't blame people, because sometimes when I explain to a group of, I remember, I think a group of students from Mont Kiara, huh? when we talk about Baba and Nyonya, and they all thought that we are part of the museum display. They thought that when they come to Malacca, they would be seeing Babas and Nyonyas being displayed in museums. Yeah. So we have this impression that old people thought that, well, Babas and Nyonyas, they often associate us with museums. Yeah. And then they would think that, oh, we sort of like living artifacts. In other words, they thought that we are dinosaurs. Yeah? So if we look back at all of us today, we are no different than our neighbors. Perhaps we do have some differences in our lifestyle, Yeah, but these are things that is very subjective to family. Yeah. So In my research that I've done about 7 years ago, that I came up with five set of hopes that would, I think, help us to think back and reflect on our identity. Yeah. Now, firstly, yeah, the language aspect, where until today, I think we still would identify our in-group members by the spoken language. Uh, but then again, we must remember it's not the Baba Patois, but the spoken language of the respective Peranakan community. Like those in Penang, they know that, oh, there is a set, their codes, they know that they speak a certain kind of Thien, that they would know that, okay, this is one of us. Same goes for us in Malacca and Singapore. Yeah, we are quite similar in that sense that the moment you open your mouth, you will know, lu orang Peranakan lu Baba, we would know. This is still a very strong aspect of our culture. But then again, yeah, to take this on to the next generation, how do we want to look at this? Because most of us today will be speaking in English or in Mandarin, yeah, or in Cantonese or whatever other languages. So I see that the Baba language now is going to a trend where it is fading. Yeah? Even in my home, we don't entirely speak the patois anymore. Sometimes we speak English, sometimes we speak Mandarin. Like me and my brother, we both went to Chinese school. So, there's code switching between us. Sometimes we speak our patois, sometimes we speak English, and sometimes we speak Mandarin. Same goes for my cousins. Yeah. But then, some of my cousins, I've noticed that they can't even speak a proper uh, sentence in the patois. So how, do we want to bring this aspect of our culture to the next generation? This is very much something that we should reflect today at this current generation. Next would be the behavioral or the mannerism codes, because why, when we talk about Baba and Nyonya, we always say that, oh, Baba and Nyonya, we are very well mannered, very no. Even uh, when we prepare ingredients to cook, we will cut it in a very, precise uh, cuts. Uh, I think recently it's not just in Malacca. I think recently I've seen a video from Penang, yeah, when they cook their bubur cha for chap kome. Oh, sorry, pengat. Not bubur cha, they call it pengat for chap kome. They cut everything, they make sure everything is in the same size. It's like they measure all the ingredient like pisang raja and so on. Yeah. So this code of conduct there, we always associate it with our culture where we are very no, they would know. When I speak, people say, yeah lah, orang Peranakan mesti cakap no, we won't just go and shout out in public and stuff like that. Yeah, so this is the next criteria. Yeah, and the third criteria is the bodily code, whereby, I don't know, a lot of people always say that, uh, Baba and Nyonya, they have that typical look lah. Then again, what typical look are you talking about? I don't know. They always say, you got that typical look. What typical look? Huh? I don't have two eyes, is it? Or my eyes are blue. I don't think my eyes are blue. No, you always say that, you have that typical look. What typical look again? How do you want to consider this typical look? But then again, when we talk, then they say, God lah, God that look, no one lah. They are from Baba and Nina community. You know what lah, you would know. So these are, it's not that I said, this is from the findings that I, from the researchers that I conducted. Yeah, so this is one of the criteria that most of us would be cut. And next would be the material culture, the much celebrated material culture of our community. Yes, we cannot take it as a marker to identify our members of our community, but it is an important aspect of our culture nevertheless. Yeah, those, especially those inheritance, we will always treasure it very much. Then we put, then people come to your house, they will say, oh, these are from my ancestors. Or instantly, most of the time you will know that they are of Baba Nyonya ancestry. Even the photographs. Food culture is also very important where, when you cook certain dishes, you will know that, hey, it's very different. Yeah, only Peranakan household would prepare this sort of dishes. Right? I better not list it down. It would be a very long list. Yeah. So you know, all these constitute part and parcel of our culture. And lastly, the most important aspect of our culture is genealogy, where we actually, Baba Nyonya is very proud of our ancestry, and it is very important, yeah, that we remember our roots. Hmm? Without them, we would not be who we are today. Uh, And when we talk about genealogy, this aspect, why is it so important? Because if we look at our scenario today, yeah, the other aspects are all actually very big and fading and is going through a lot of adjustment. Like for instance, the material culture, a lot of non-Baba Nyonya collectors that I know of owns more. They have got more antiques than we do at home. Yeah? So can they be constituted as a Baba or as a Nyonya, you know, or they are someone who are interested in Baba and Nyonya artifacts, and then they have all these collection at home. Yeah? So this genealogy here plays a very important role, where it is good for us to always keep track of our beginnings, of our roots, and then we pass this knowledge on. Huh? Why? Because if we don't pass this knowledge on to the next generation, I give you a very good example. I think in the year 2019, my family have a family reunion somewhere in Mecca, and then we have dinner. You know, all my cousins, we were seated at the same table, and then my cousin-in-law asked me, "Hey, you guys are Baba and Nyonya, right?" I said, "Yeah, yeah." Then means my husband is also a Baba lah. Then I was like, "What makes you think that he is not a Baba?" Just because my cousin who grew up in Bangsa don't practice any of the practices that we still do. Yeah. Nor you see my auntie in Kebaya. So they would, the wife that married to him never thought that the husband is actually a Baba until she talked to me. She knows that I'm a Baba, and then then she sat back and she think again. Wait, if you are a Baba, that means my husband is also a Baba. Then I was like, yeah, you know, in the in another words, I think my uncle don't really stress on this part of the culture. I hope he's not listening to my cousins. So when it is not talked about or discussed about in the family, then they just take things for granted. Hmm? So this genealogy and awareness of it is very important for us to pass it down to the next generation and to make sure that there is this continuity. Hmm? Okay. Now look at this photograph. For instance, it's taken in the year 1920, somewhere in Lekin Kandang. Yeah. Now, if we look back, at all the definition, like sarung and kebaya is an important aspect of our culture. But if you look at this photograph, which is taken in the year 1920, yeah, uh, there's not even a single lady in this photograph seen in sarung kebaya. Okay, now this here is a very good reminder of the evolution of our culture, whereby if we look at it, yeah, it is from the very beginning been evolving. Like for example, this photograph here, yeah, was taken in the year 1920. It shows that people in the past, even the young girl there standing, is wearing baju panjang instead of kebaya. Because people always say that, oh, kebaya is meant for younger Yoninas and baju panjang is meant for elderly. Yes, true. But when was it? Yeah, perhaps during the 50s or 60s that, kebaya is uh, a attire for younger generation, and the elder generation will be seen in baju panjang more often. But then, if we look back at the evolution of Nyonya attire, there is, this journey whereby it started off with baju panjang and then became kebaya later on. Yeah. So we are at the stage of going through another process of evolution of our culture. Yeah, of course, if we look at this in the year 1920, if we were to compare during the 70s, it's already very different. Even the 60s or 50s is already very different with this era here, whereby they don't really wear baju panjang anymore. Yeah, and uh, from this now today, how we would still want to define ourselves. Yeah, from that, it's the same family, it's my family just now. That photograph is of my great grandparents. This is a family photo taken, I think, about 5 years ago. Yeah. Now, we often like to portray our identity through attire. To take this photograph, we really went through a lot of um, effort to dress my mother in kebaya, put on all the accessories. Myself and my brother, we don't normally wear like that on a daily basis. We just wear short pants and t-shirt. That's it at home. Yeah. But to take a photograph, we'll be wearing like this. So how, do we want? Of course, we would want to be remembered, or we would want to be associated with our heritage, hmm, when we express ourselves like this. But on a daily basis, do we, you know, put in all these efforts to to be seen dressing like this? Even my grandmother don't really wear kebaya anymore nowadays. She just put on her baju rumah with buttons. Yeah, of course, still with sarung, but she would not be wearing kebaya that often anymore due to her age. She's 99 this year. Okay, so these are the negotiation of our identity, of the expression of our identity, how much we still want to hold on to, and to what degree do we open to accept what it is uh, today. The adjustment, what adjustment that we can do to the current situation. For example, this photograph is taken indoor in the house, as compared to the one that I showed earlier. It was taken at the before the main entrance of the house. Why? Because in the past there's no lighting in the house. The lights will not be as bright. So if it's in the house, the effect will not be as good. So you have to take photographs outside at the main entrance to have that photograph taken. So things like this have already, changed. Yeah? So there are a degree of changes that would happen, will happen, that already happened in our culture, that we have to be open to. And perhaps it is good to accept it. Yeah, And at the same time, we spread, like I said just now, we spread the awareness, which is very important. Yeah. Like, for instance, my cousin is not the one from Bangsa. Yeah. I think because my uncle didn't really uh, 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 pass on that, or create this Peranakan awareness in my cousins. So, when they grow up, they don't really have this Peranakan awareness in them, uh, which resulting in people not knowing that they are of Pamanina uh, heritage. Hmm? Then when we talk, then only people start to realize, hey, oh, okay, so, oh, they are of Baba and Nyonya. Things like that. Yeah, which I think it is sad, but it is happening. Yeah? So this is something that is important for us to always bear in mind. Okay. Now, okay, like I mentioned just now, on the modern context, we would, don't really like, for example, this photograph taken during my grandmother's 90th birthday. Uh, we don't wear, traditional attire like how we do to take that formal family portrait. Yeah. So we just, dress like everyone, uh, and then have that photograph taken. Yeah. Then it shows we have to accept all these uh, modern changes, rather than we must wear kebaya, baju Cina, party, to show that we are Pavan. Yes, it is good, but how many of us can still do that on a daily basis? Yeah. And then also, those days, if you notice all the photographs of our ancestors taken, they are very stern. They don't even smile. Yeah. Like today, you see my grandma even self-repeat. Yeah. With myself during Chinese New Year. And so this is something that I think it is good. All this uh, adjustment that we do uh, to remind us that yes, we are, Baba and Nyonya, but also we are Baba and Nyonya who are living in the 21st century, and not like those in the past, like my grandmother. Whenever we want to take a photograph of her, when I say, Mama, Ma, kita mau ambil gambar, she would like, before that she was smiling, talking to us, smiling and everything. But when we say that we want to take photograph, she would like, no, it's in her, like, she's so used to taking photographs is a very serious matter. So every time now, I spend a lot of time to cheer her up, to make her smile. I think, Ma, senyum, senyum, tawa, tak usah kemam. So that she would be smiling, would be seen smiling in photographs taken today. Yeah. Okay. Now, uh, let's talk about, I'm already at my concluding slide. Yeah. Now let's look at our journey that I've mentioned. Yeah, from the past until today. Yeah, I think we all know very well our past, our colorful, glorious past. Yeah, and today, if we look at our own Baba Nina community today, we all can speak all these Mandarin, English, uh, and the Baba Patois for Malacca and Singapore case became very poor in command. Like, they're not, many of us are not as fluent anymore like our parents or our grandparents. Yeah. And then, like I've mentioned, we don on this modern attire and so on. Yeah? Living a modern lifestyle, not in all those traditional houses, and even blend our rempah. No more our spices, we don't pound, we blend our spices. So now, all these adjustment, we have to accept that all this is happening. uh, and if you want to say that, if you don't tumbuk your rempah, then you are not preparing a Nyonya cuisine anymore, then I don't think my house is also preparing Nyonya cuisine anymore on a daily basis. Yeah. So how or what we want to be seen or be known in the future would be very much what we do today. Yeah, we have, discussed this to a great extent that a lot of people say that, oh, the Peranakan culture is fading, the Baba India community is fading, it would one day just extinct. But I think again, instead of saying that we are all fading or extinct, it is better to think that we are actually evolving. It is not that we are evolving now. Since the past, we have been evolving through generations, like you see from 1920s or maybe even earlier, and then we move, and then now we are going through all these modern pressures that cause us to change, uh, that simplified things. Okay, like even the Semayang culture, those days, 12 bowls of dishes cut down to 8. Then now many opt to 4, but we still Semayang. Rather than we say that if you don't prepare 12 dishes or 8 dishes, then you better not Semayang. Then, we would discourage people to actually continue that tradition. So accepting modern changes is very important, yeah, for the continuation of our culture, to make sure that this uh, beautiful culture would continue to exist in the future. In what shape would it be? Then it's very much depending on what we do today. Like for instance, spreading awareness just now that I said, at least they have this awareness in them, and there would be hope for the culture to uh, continue. If you don't even know your culture, there is no hope that you would appreciate it, and there is no hope that you would actually, continue to practice it. Yeah, like uh, my cousin's case, for instance, just now. Yeah, to the extent that his wife don't even know that he is a Baba. They know very well that I am on one. They always see me on TV, sometimes on interviews. And then, suddenly when we had this conversation, then it just struck her, hey, means that my husband is also one of the years. Yeah. So, to that extent, I believe, yeah, awareness plays an important role, yeah, in making sure that our culture would continue to survive. Yeah. So lastly, yeah, I did this quick summary where, with awareness, yeah, it gives hope, hope that people would actually know, uh, and would have hope for them to love the culture, be passionate about the culture and heritage, and then, to continue to practice it. Then we have this continuity, rather than, when you don't even know, then there is no hope for the culture to continue to be brought forward to the future. Yeah. So I think what today we can do, of course, we have different degrees of Peranakan practices, lifestyle criteria among us. Some families would say that, oh, your family is so typical, we are not that. Fine. But at least you have that awareness in you. And among your family, then there would already have hope, that passion and love would have for the culture in within the family, and then towards the wider community, and at the same time that would bring a continuation to our culture. So that is all that I have to share today. Yeah, I think I would hand it back to Gwen and see.
Thank you, Baba Thien. It was
Welcome.
thought-provoking session that, well, we are enriched and there are a lot of thinking that we have to do about our culture and our awareness. Right. And which actually brings the subject matter to our convention that is end of this year, actually. It's about Baba identity.
Mm.
And this year's convention, we are heading that direction about awareness in our culture and specifically the Peranakan identity.
Mhm.
And so it's thought-provoking that will lead us towards November during our convention. Yeah. For the rest of us, thank you for joining. And I have a couple of questions that I will put forth to you, Thien. Before, actually, it's going to be a very different format later because on our chat, there was a lot of nostalgia being exchanged by members.
Mhm.
And I think some of them have come out during this session to say they remembered what it was like during their growing up years, so on and so forth. And I'll let some of them share with us later when I unmute them, and they would like to share their growing up experiences. But in the meantime, I've got this question that we have to answer. This one: how can we find the balance between encouraging spoken Baba patois and language taught in school, especially for children? Language is often picked up when they are young. What's your take on this question?
Well, I think this is something very much, it falls back to the family or the individual. Why? Like for example, my case, yeah, when I grew up, it is not, in me that I must learn this language. No, it just came to me naturally because why the need of me to communicate with my grandmothers, yeah. So taking that for example, we should actually try as much to expose our young ones, yeah, with uh, that language or that patois, so that because we don't expect them to learn it in school, neither do I, yeah. So it is a spoken language used at home. So if you don't use it at home, when we all want to speak in English, to perfect our English, when would it be for our younger ones to have a chance to practice this patois? So it is our responsibility to be using it at home as much as we can. We try, yeah, to use it as much as we can, as often as we can, and then that itself would actually give hope to the continuation of the language. Because why? It is not something that you can sit down in a class and learn a foreign language, for instance. And if let's say you are learning Japanese, after you leave the classroom, if you don't need to speak or converse in Japanese, somehow or other you will just tend to forget what you have learned or taught in class. Yeah. Same goes for this patois. You must expose this language to your family members, your young ones, as much as you can, as early as you can, because if they have reached a certain age and then only you start to speak to them in the patois, a lot of times they would not want to reply you. They would just, although they understand, but they would want to reply, they would feel more comfortable replying in either English or in Mandarin. Yeah, so make it a habit from the start, yeah, to speak this patois as much as you can at home.
Thank you. Another question is,
Mm.
batik, is it a part of the Peranakan culture?
Batik, well, I now if you were to talk or discuss about this, we need a proper convention to actually talk on batik itself. Yeah. Now, if we look at our Peranakan heritage, well, the women of the Peranakan community have always been seen in batik sarung, right? So it has become part of our culture. Yeah, or I would say that it is part of the larger Southeast Asian culture that we have accepted into our hybrid culture, that today we would associate batik with Peranakan or with Baba Nyonya. But it is not fair to say that batik is exclusively belonging to us. Yeah, it is a shared thing in the whole of Southeast Asia, but it is also an aspect of the Peranakan culture today and as well as in the past. I hope I've answered to that question.
Don't worry, Thien, because in August, we do have a interesting topic that will be coming up about
Okay,
splendor
good
in
one.
batik.
Yes.
So yes, it will be addressing this issue as well.
Okay, stay tuned to the
On
talk about.
patterns, yeah. So yes, I guess it what is at the end of the day what was fashionable during that time. Yeah, it was worn. So happens that the Peranakan community wore it often, perhaps, and it was just a daily attire and being kept well. Like some in the group has discussed it, how it was, like what you said, it was starched and kept pristine condition, so on and so forth. Yeah. So there is a very interesting conversation that's going on in the chat group. Would anyone like to unmute themselves and exchange stories with us? It would be nice to hear from you. Anybody want to share?
I think I will share then.
Yes. Identify yourself first, Matt.
Hi, Matthew. Yeah, so my family is a very unique family because my dad is a Bawakek and who married to a Hainanese with my mom. So at home, most of us, at home, to them, to my mom, Malay is a very foreigner thing to her, especially Baba Malays. So in the end, my father and I, we have to standardize our language at home. We have to speak Hokkien because it's just for her to understand. But on the same time, we do also mix a bit of Malays and other languages also to make it very multilingual in it. On the same time, we also make it very localized in our language. Yes. And my grandma still speak Patois and Hokkien too. And on the same time, we also speak our cake lah, and on the same time. So it's a three language at home. So I felt there's a beauty of this multilingual at home. So I don't know what you guys think about this multilingual thing in the committee. Yes. So I do feel like, okay, I do feel the same as what most of you feel, because during my army days, my Mandarin is very 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 pelat. I just say very pelat. So in this case, I speak most of the time with my superiors. They all in English, which they don't like it because they are not Peranakans. They don't have Peranakan roots compared to me. At least I'm a Cherok, which they say that they couldn't accept it. This is very very sad, and I felt that it's a bit of racist onto it lah. So it's a bit. I can say it's a very sensitive topic, but on the same time, I mean, that's the beauty. I mean, I'm proud to have the Baba roots in my blood, and nothing can stop me. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Yes, we hear you. And from the various conversations that are in the chat, well, some people are sharing that they're not shy to say they've got F9 for Mandarin in school. Yeah, so yes, it's been a uphill battle, even for myself, speaking Mandarin. Till today, I have friends telling me, Donna, you open your mouth, speak Mandarin, we don't hear, we can't understand you at all. So I've given up. I've totally given up. Yeah. So is that an occurrence also in Malacca, Thien?
I think it is for a certain generation, but then when we talk about the current generation, my generation, for instance, yeah, many of us were actually sent to Chinese school, and then we face this dilemma there. Like Matthew mentioned just now, I've also always failed my Chinese. Okay, Until a certain extent, I think when I was in secondary school, when I wanted to drop the Mandarin subject, then my teacher got very upset, saying that, how can you drop your own mother tongue? And at the same time, I scored 100% for Bahasa Melayu, Malay. Yeah, then she said, don't you think that it's a disgrace to your own community whereby, you can actually score or you did so well in a foreign language than your own mother tongue? Then I just kept quiet, and then she said, don't tell me you are a Baba. I said, yeah, I am. And she kept quiet. And then after that, she's like, I think she felt bad, because Mandarin is not my mother tongue. I speak Malay at home, yeah, and English. So I'm Baba Malay to be exact. So yes, I think there is this. Although we can speak Mandarin, but I sometimes have these difficulties in certain terminology because when we talk to friends, it's very different when we do a formal presentation. Yeah, so I think there is this degree of differences in the fluency of Mandarin. Yeah, now that China is opening up, and then many of us start to don't want to be left out, so they start to learn Mandarin as much as possible. That was why my father decided to send me and my brother to Chinese school. Yeah.
Ah, right. Oh, Thien, there's one question that somebody posed. It's about, could you comment about group of communities in Terengganu, Taiping, and Kelantan in Malaysia? Are you able to comment about any of the groups there, the Peranakan groups?
Well, I don't really study much on their community yet, yeah, but I did know or did some research or readings on written about their community there. Yeah, it is very interesting. Yeah, no doubt they are also another form of Peranakan Chinese. But then again, like I said, we must always remember that when we talk about Peranakan, there are so much differences. Although we are similar, yet we are different from one another. Yeah. So those in Terengganu, Kelantan, yeah, the East Coast Peranakan, they are very different to the extent whereby if we look at the Straits Settlement, we are very much we have this Western influence. We are very much Anglophile, yeah, compared to those in Terengganu and Kelantan. They has got more Chinese influence in their culture. Like for example, wayang kulit is an important aspect of their culture, yeah, and they don't speak the Baba Patois. They speak their Kelantanese dialect, which is very interesting also. Yeah, but at the same time, they maintain that so-called Peranakan spirit that we all celebrate. Where we are, I would say that we are very diversified community where we can adjust to our surroundings very well, adapt to it. Yeah, like for example, in Kelantan, they still practice ancestral worship, and there is this one dish that's similar to our ponte. They call it babi hong, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so very similar. Yeah, and they also have certain offerings that will be placed on altars as well. Yeah, which is similar to us. Yeah, so sadly, their community is not being highlighted enough, which I think perhaps in the future we can do more cultural exchange with them so that we will know more about the Peranakan in the East Coast.
Thank you. Another question.
Mm.
Can we substitute Baba Nonya with Baba Nonya and the Peranakan term?
Oh, well, I did not talk much about it. Actually, if we were to look at the term Peranakan, yeah, I would say that Peranakan is a word or a term is a umbrella term. Yeah, it's the umbrella term for all the Peranakan community. Because why? If we are aware of the Peranakan community, it's not just us, Baba Indonesia, or the Peranakan Chinese. We also have the Peranakan Chetty, yeah, the Peranakan Indians, and as well as the Eurasian and also Portuguese Peranakan in Malacca itself. So if we look at the word Peranakan, it is actually a Malay word. From the root word is anak, per, with the prefix and affix per and an. So it's referring to local born. Yeah, so if we were to, hold on to that definition, local born, then everyone local born here is a Peranakan. Yeah. So, then if we look deeper, then we have this set of criteria to be known as Peranakan, to be classified as a Peranakan community. Yeah. So we would have this different Peranakan, like Peranakan Chinese, Baba Nyonya, Portuguese, and Peranakan Chiti. So the reason why the term Peranakan is interchangeable with Baba and Nyonya, because Baba and Nyonya is the most outstanding, or we shine out among all the other Peranakan community that people always, forgotten about the other Peranakan community. Because when we talk about Peranakan, people always say, oh, Baba and Nyonya, because we overshadow the rest. Yeah. So it is good for us to always include the other Peranakan community, because why, our Peranakan culture is very flexible. Yeah. So it's not something that is very fixed. Of course, when you talk about Baba and Nyonya, then it's very specific, referring to only the Peranakan Chinese. Yeah. And if you say Peranakan, yes, it's referring to a wider community, not just us. So I don't think that we should be substituting Peranakan to Baba Nyonya or Baba Nyonya and Peranakan, but it has been always taken for granted that Baba Nyonya is Peranakan. It should be Baba Nyonya is part of Peranakan.
All right. Thank you, Thien. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Historically, the term Straits Chinese was also quite acceptable?
Yes. Yes. Because before this, we are known with many terms: Straits Chinese, the Kings or Queens Chinese. Yeah. But then again, now we want to be more inclusive, because if we were to talk about the Straits Chinese, we are only referring to the Peranakan Chinese of the Straits, and not to those in Indonesia, our Peranakan brothers and sisters in Phuket, as well as those in the East Coast. So the wider term now would be Peranakan, to be more inclusive to the other community, because now we are living in the borderless modern world, so we interact quite easily with other members of the Peranakan community from all over the world.
Thank you. And talk about inclusiveness. Okay, there's a question here. Other than awareness, how else can we make the Peranakan culture relevant to the younger generation, whose lives are already disrupted by so many emerging issues?
I think this is something very challenging, for us to make it relevant. As to how, I do not have one solid answer, because it's very much depending on that person or that family itself. What is relevant to my family may not be relevant to your family. Yeah, it depends on the context of that particular person or that family. So for instance, I think besides awareness, what we can do or best is that we try to inculcate these Peranakan elements or knowledge or practice as much as we can in our livelihood. Not just like, oh, we set a day, every Sunday is a Peranakan day in our family, then it will be very hard. It should come naturally. Like, maybe in the food aspect, food is a very good exposure, because everybody needs to eat, and you eat at least 3 times a day. So instead of buying them donuts, maybe can start by educating them with pineapple tarts or with rempah udang, something like that, and then start to explain about the food culture, and then that would lead to other aspect of our culture, rather than, oh, we must set, okay, Sunday everybody wear traditional attire. Maybe like those church goers can say, oh, Sunday we wear traditional attire to church, for instance. Maybe it would add up pressure to your kids rather than encouraging them. Yeah. So to make them be aware and to adjust it, to what extent, that would very much depending on the family or that individual. And then from there we move forward, because it works differently for different people. Yeah. So some people like to make kueh, then you expose more of the kueh culture. Some people like embroidery, then expose about the embroidery, tapestry culture. So that would be very much your take, to what extent you want to preserve in your family and then in the wider community.
Right. Thank you, Thien, for a very interesting afternoon. A lot of thought-provoking questions you'll be going through, and I'm sure the community will be intrigued by, well, when we're able to socialize, there'll be lots to talk about.
Yeah.
Right. To all, thank you for joining us this afternoon. And next month, we do have an interesting coming up session with Sean Sia. Yep, here he is. And it's all about the king of streets, Xia Liang Xia. Okay, so next month is on the 25th of July at 3 p.m. So do join us then. And then moving forward, in the coming months, there will be fantastic speakers that will be presenting under TPAS. So we will announce those dates as we go along. Yeah. In the meantime, before we log off, we would appreciate a little time taken for your feedback, so that we could improve. And every bit of encouragement helps. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon.